Welcome to our workshop today. We're excited to have you all. Let me see. There we go. So hi everyone, my name is Alejandra Pérez. I am an organizer with the Washington Dream Coalition, have been for the last 6 years. And then in my daytime job, I am a college and career manager for the Community Center for Education Results, doing college and career work. And then I'll let Daniela introduce herself real quick.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniela Murguia, and I am also an organizer with the Washington Dream Coalition. And I've been here, I believe, for 3 years now. It feels like a long time. And during the day, I also work in education as an education advocate at Northwest Education Access, where we get to work with students in transitioning programs across the region. And I'm really excited to be here and co-presenting with Alejandra today.
Yeah, so thank you all for choosing our workshop. We're excited to have you all here. Two things, there's 63 folks here, so that's really awesome. Just a couple of disclaimers. Daniela and I have not presented virtually together lately, so this is going to be new for us. But then also, the other thing is, we are not the best at telling each other when to go to the next slide, so we will be going back and forth sharing our screen, which may be a little distracting, but not deal with it. That sounded bad. But what is the word? Like bear with us. Bear with us. You know, and we'll go ahead and like go back and forth on that. And then please get super engaged in the chat. Feel free to ask us any questions. We are here to answer them. We are not lawyers, but we both are undocumented. So we bring our lived experience as well as former students, but also as educators doing this work. So we love that you love our energy. We joke a lot. We'd like to like have fun. We hope you like the music that we had going on. We're like, this is a long break, so let's put some music for but yes, thank you all for joining us, and we'll go ahead and get started. You can see right here on the screen the bit.ly for this, and then we're gonna also drop it on the chat. You feel free to follow along on your own, or just follow the presentation. You will have access to all of this. Great. So our workshop is called Undocumented and Underserved, learning how to best support undocumented students and families. I honestly don't know if that's how we called it in the thing, but it is really focusing on making sure that we are understanding the ways that currently undocumented folks are not being served in any of our education systems well. So it's really to ensure that we learn resources and best practices and how to support them, because that is the minimum we can do for our undocumented folks. So right before we dive into the presentation, we're gonna play a quick video that we believe is pretty powerful. There are two things that are a little problematic with it, but we'll address them. We are sharing our audio, so this should work, and we'll go ahead and watch it real quick.
One of my kids talked about being home alone, and it was a bam on the door, and then he peeped out the window, saw that it was ice. He ran and hid in the closet because he didn't know what to do.
He came to class very sad, very lethargic, somberish, and I went up to, I told him that if he can stay after class with me, and I said, Mijo, what's going on? He goes, I had to wake up at 3 in the morning, Ms. Benavides. And I go, why?
She had come to my room and in tears. So I had known the student, we'll call her.
Eileen was actually one of the only students to reach out to me, needing some help.
This young man lived with his father. And his father and mother, they live, I think, probably 5 blocks from each other or something like that. But the kid always came to school buttoned up. I started noticing that his clothes were hanging out, and I'm looking at the essays that we were writing in class, and halfway finished. I waited about a week or so, and things didn't get much better, you know. So then I said, listen, you need to talk to me. Tell me what's going on here.
One student of mine, she was a 5th grader in my class, so I gave all of them my contact info when they graduated, that if they ever need help in anything, they can reach out to me.
There was a conversation happening in one of our other classes about the views of Donald Trump in terms of immigration. She was extremely vulnerable in that situation where she didn't feel like she could speak up. All of a sudden didn't feel safe to her.
Why? Why did you wake up at 3 in the morning? He goes, because ICE came and knocked at the door and took my dad. I couldn't sleep after that.
As immigrants, we do face discrimination or racism, but that should empower us to be better and to show the people that immigrants are not all those generalizations that they say we are.
My parents are both undocumented. They believe that education is the way to get ahead in life because with education comes power.
And so I just would go over and tutor her, got to know her family better through that. And they've been to my home and they've opened to me a little bit more what they go through as a family.
Technically, my responsibility as an educator through my credentials is to teach and give them the curriculum that they are required to pass state tests and to be successful in higher education. However, if I cannot have a stable child, if I cannot have a child with love, internal love, how can I teach them?
On the way to the store, I saw a car that was suspicious. It was ICE, and my dad asked what he had done wrong for them to stop him. They told him to be quiet and to get off the car because he has an early deportation. They handcuffed him and they left.
We all saw that heartbreaking recording that she did, yet she insisted on coming to school. When I saw Fatima coming to school in tears and growing up as a brown person during apartheid, I just relived so many of those apartheid evils, and I knew then that we needed to mobilize. And I was with them that evening as we went down to stop the deportation, to stop the van from leaving the ICE offices. And fortunately, we got to stay for a half an hour before he was supposed to have left.
We as teachers, we have these children in our classroom, and if we see something that is unjust, we have to speak up.
It's children who we're talking about, children who have come here on no fault of their own, who are being punished. It's kids that are striving to make the world a better place, to make their lives better, just like anybody else.
My parents just wanted a better future for us. They sacrificed the commodities they had in Mexico, and I mean, that sacrifice is what pushed me, inspires me. If my parents did that for me, then I have to repay them by getting a better education, because that's what my parents brought us here for.
They need a lot of connection with not only their home environment, but the community, and as well as the institution, because they've been pushed out of the system.
We're all humans. We're all in the same party. We're the human race, and just like our country is founded on the belief that all human beings are equal and have inalienable rights, that does not exclude these young people who just want an opportunity for life, liberty, pursuit of happiness.
You better walk the walk if you're a teacher. If you say this is important, then you better act like it's important. So I teach because I want to change the world and try to make a difference. And these kids laugh at me at first, and then they go out and do it. There has been a huge inequality from the start, and there's been nothing to level the playing field. And I think education is where that can happen, where that liberation can come from.
All right. So with that, I really like this video. I think the core of it, it's really powerful about showing, you know, educators literally standing up for families and even trying to stop a deportation from happening, and then seeing just the complexities of having both undocumented students, but also maybe parents, right? There are two things that I think are very problematic in it. One is they basically say that the children are here at no fault of their own. That is very blaming language that is used to blame parents for bringing their young people to this country. So we believe that nobody is at fault for being here. Migration happens because of really terrible reasons. In our home countries, I think all of us would love to have stayed in our home countries if that was a possibility. And the other one is the whole part that they're talking about the US being the land of the free and all of that. And I think all of us can agree that's not true. And that we do in fact live in a country where humanity is not seen as such. And then that, you know, that there's just straight up racism and other isms that we face every single day. And even though that was at its core value, we know that that excluded many people, particularly Native and Black folks. So we can't assume that that's correct. But other than that, I hope you like the video because I think it really does show the power that educators can have in young people's lives, but also the responsibility that this the roles of being educators brings, and then how we must be in support constantly of undocumented folks. So we're gonna go ahead and move to the next part, which is our stories of self. We like to ground ourselves in our stories. We're gonna keep this super short in comparison to how we usually do. So we'll keep it at like 2 minutes each, Daniela. We wanna share with you all why we're in this work, and then share this quote from Catalina Velasquez, who wrote an article called, I believe it's the 13 Realities of Being Undocumented and Living Under Trump. And the quote says, "To be undocumented is to have people making money out of our stories and speaking for us, rather than creating space for us to speak on behalf of ourselves." So we like to take this space and talk about ourselves because nobody else can. So again, everyone, my name is Alejandra. These are pictures of me. What else can I say? This is me as a baby and little. And then so on. But I was born and raised in Guatemala. I came to the US when I was 12 years old. And when I moved to the US, I immigrated with a tourist visa, had been in the US previously, and then migrated to my uncle's home in LA. And the reason why was my mom was going through a divorce, but also had some debt. And the goal was always to be here for about a year and then go back home. That year turned into 14, 15, something like that. And I haven't been, well, I have been, but that's a different story. And, you know, haven't been able to move back home, and doesn't seem like that will ever happen. But when I moved to LA, and I know you don't know where these pictures are taken, but none of them are taken in LA actually. And that's because I had a really rough time when I moved to LA. I was a preteen and then a teenager. And then I was in a place that I didn't like at the time, and then continued to just be told that because I was going to become undocumented within 6 months of being here, that I was not going to be able to go to college. And this was told to me by family members, and then later also by my school counselor. So it was just very not motivating, and I started to skip class, not go to school, not do my homework, and then just essentially just not doing anything. So I was literally about to fail all my classes, and that's when my mom decided that we were going to move to Seattle. I don't think my mom actually even noticed how bad my grades were, because she had to have 3 jobs because she was getting paid under minimum wage at all of her jobs. And at that time in California, minimum wage was about $7 an hour. Nobody can leave with less than $7 an hour. So that's why she had so many jobs. And because of all that exploitation, she decided to move to Seattle. So we moved to Seattle, Washington, and then that is kind of when my life changed, because I met an amazing educator. His name is Ray Morales. He's right here. And he was my school social worker, and he was the only Latina staff member at the school at the time. And I felt really comfortable telling him I was undocumented. And then he started to take me to just get me really involved in school, and then take me to programs. And then he took all this little group of us to a conference in Tacoma, Washington, that focused primarily on Latinx students, but they had a workshop on how to go to college being undocumented. So he's like, you need to go to this workshop. And that's when I learned that in Washington State, we could in fact go to college. And that really got me very motivated to essentially do more work and get more involved in school, I was still your average student, you know, who like nobody pays attention to, but still had somebody in the school who really like changed my life. With a lot of support, I was able to go to college. I got I got a lot of scholarships that allowed me to go. During that time in Washington State, we did not have financial aid for undocumented students, so we had to figure out how we're gonna pay for it. So I went to Ida Bothell. I started to get really involved doing undocu trainings, which is here at the bottom right, and then also doing organizing and protesting on campus to fight for what was just for students. I did end up graduating, and you can see my undocumented stole thingy majingy. Very proud, very out about being undocumented, and graduated in 2016, and then started working in my job that I have right now, doing education work, which is a really cool job. Did go back to get my master's degree. That's another story. We're not gonna touch on how to get a master's degree being undocumented today, but if folks have questions, happy to talk about them. But it was like high school all over again, where there's no money if you are undocumented and trying to go to grad school. Like, how do we pay for it? How do we navigate that system? So that's a little bit about me and how I came into the work. Essentially just doing a lot of undocu organizing, but also doing work in education, and have been trying to do that since. Yeah, and then I'll give it to Daniela, and then I think I'll stop sharing my screen.
Cool, thank you so much, Ale. So yeah, a little bit about me. So I'm Daniela again, and I have pictures here. I have some pictures of my mom and my grandma, and when I was little, as well, when I lived in Mexico. So I was born and raised in Mexico until I was 11 years old. And my mom and my dad, they come from a background where they didn't really go to school themselves. My mom started working since she was very, very young. And as we were growing up, my mom would just tell me it was ingrained in me that I was destined to go to school. My mom really, really wanted us to go to a college. Like, that became a very normalized thing in our family. And my mom, she would spend all her time working, like really all the time, and we didn't get to see her. And my mom just made the decision of wanting to start a new life, what she would call also like having a better life. And she said, let's move to the United States. So it really was more out of a choice that we came over here, because she also just wanted us to speak English and to have all this just different access. So we got a tourist visa, we came to the US, and we overstayed. And that's the reality of like our story of mine and my sisters, because I have two other sisters that so we all came over here. So I started here in 6th grade, and I immediately started to learn that just the language was very different, of like, if college is for you, and if like that's what you choose. And then my mom, she owns a hair salon, so she would have like a lot of like clients that were Latinx, a lot that were undocumented, and they would tell things to my mom like, oh no, students that are people that are undocumented can't go to college here, right? Because you don't have papers, so your daughters can't go. So that was like immediately the messaging we started to hear, and that just kind of started to get reinforced. So I stopped caring about school. I was like, I know we've talked about this since I was little, and it was super normal back home, but over here, that has completely, shifted. So I stopped caring about school. I was doing horrible, like flunked my classes all of freshman year and sophomore year, and it wasn't until my older sister, who attended a Latinx leadership camp, where she started, so my older sister, she's the one that started to kind of do better, because she was also like not doing good anymore in school. Then I saw she was getting better, and I was like, why? Why are you doing better? And then she wanted to get me to go to that camp. And once I was able to go to that camp is when I got connected to other Latinx youth in Washington State that some were also undocumented and were sharing their story. And I was like, wow, I'm not alone, right? Like, this is something that is major. But I also got to meet some mentors that were like, oh yeah, I'm undocumented, but I graduated from this university. And I was like, whoa, so it is doable. So that's when I immediately learned that my goal and my dream in life was my parents also dreamed to go to college was not completely inaccessible. So That's when I started to get better. Like I came back and finished high school strong. I did Running Start and started to get involved at the Latinx club at my at Edmonds Community College, which is where I went here in Washington. And then I transferred to UW-Bothell, where I met Ale. And once I met Ale, she got me involved in doing undocumented work in the state. So that's what I've been doing for a while. I like to add pictures of joy with my friends here. My first undocumented training for educators on how to best support undocumented students, our undocumented healing circle, and also some graduating photos. And that's just kind of how I got involved. So I'm gonna stop there so we can go on with the presentation. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen now. All right,
I'm sorry, Daniela and I talk a lot.
We do, we can talk so much. Let's see, okay. Let me share my screen. All right, can folks see my screen? Perfect. Oh no, I started at the wrong slide. Sorry about that. Here. Cool. All right, so here's some, we're gonna go over some general overview, kind of like go in more bite-sized pieces here about, the rest of the presentation. So here's another quote by Catalina Velasquez reading, "To be undocumented in this country is to be one of the 11.5 million, which exceeds the population of Hungary, Czech Republic, and Tunisia." I can never say that word. Cool. All right, so we're gonna go over some different immigration statuses. This is just a list, like a compiled list of a larger document. If you have, if you're on the PowerPoint link that we sent you, you'll find on the comment section the link to go to it. And this is just an important sheet for educators to know the different types of immigration terminology, specifically, the politicized descriptions of these identities. The one that we focus on in our trainings is the undocumented identity. We really don't have the experience of these other forms of immigration statuses, right? Because as we said, we're undocumented. And also I didn't disclose, but I'm undocumented without DACA. So that's been my specific identity and how I have navigated living in the US. So this is a really cool list that you all should check out. As we speak about language and identity, there is also larger narratives, right, around the specific words. So we know that the Dreamer narrative, I started to hear it when Obama came about with DACA, and I was very confused by it. I remember my mom was like, "Oh my gosh, we're getting papers." And I was like, "What?" And we looked into it, we sat down, we looked at this DACA thing, and we learned immediately that we didn't qualify for it, right? But before that, there was the DREAM Act that was being fought for. It died, it didn't pass. But it really, what came out of that was the DACA program, which was fought and really won by undocumented youth and undocumented organizing. And at the time I was just learning about all these things, so I wasn't super involved in those pieces. But as soon as I found out, I was like, oh, I don't even qualify. And we also learned that, my parents were kind of not even mentioned in the DACA program at all. It was very hyper-focused on younger, undocumented folks that were brought at not follow their own, right? All that language, which basically created this bad immigrant versus good immigrant narrative, where a dreamer is, a super sensationalized person that is ready to cure cancer, that is, super bright type of person, which I don't identify with this narrative, right? Because it just creates, again, like I said, that hierarchy of good immigrant, versus a bad immigrant. I like this quote that says, the word dreamer leaves out an average undocumented student, someone's mom, someone's dad, really elder community members, and those that also have a criminal record, or whose path is really not in the educational path that is, the four-year university route. And it just creates just that really messed up division. And I really like this image too, that I just want to read it out loud. It's F is for fetishization of the overachiever dreamer stereotype. Although you have worked hard in making it to college, the expectation that the only acceptable undocumented students are those with flawless academic records is both unrealistic and oppressive. The psychic weight of being undocumented alone inhibits academic accomplishment. Cool. We're gonna move on to the next section. So more, a little more about language. So there's 3 buckets that we want to go over with you all. The first bucket is around identity and experience. This is a word that we really encourage educators specifically and allies and non-undocumented folks, so citizens, to use the word undocumented because it captures both identity and experience of undocumented people. Then the second bucket is that there are terms that are tied to laws and programs, right? So the one we just went over, the dreamer identity, then there's the HB 1079 and the documented. I remember when I started going to college, when I was a Running Start student, I immediately graduated high school and applied, as a full college student at my community college, and they told me that, oh, are you an HB 1079 student? And I felt so weird saying that. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I am an HB 1079 student, I guess. But it just feels really weird tying an identity and saying I'm this, because it's like it's tied to a law or like a piece of legislation. So I just felt really weird about it. And then there's also the documented, so those that have DACA. And then the third one is just negative and derogatory. So this is the I word. We definitely do not use this word and do not want anyone using this word. I know some undocu folks use it as like a form of reclaiming. So again, that is in the undocu world and undocu spaces. It is not for citizens or educators who are not undocumented really to use. So that's definitely a word we don't encourage folks to use, either illegal or alien. Okay, cool. We're gonna go to the next slide. All right, some demographics. So this captures where some undocumented folks come from. There's a large amount that come from Mexico, but there's also undocumented immigrants from Honduras, China, Guatemala, El Salvador, and this is just important to keep in mind, right? Because there's a misconception that only Mexican people are undocumented folks, when really it's not true. It's from so many different countries that folks come from. And then regions of birth as well: Caribbean, Africa, Europe, Canada, South America, and Asia, and also Mexico and central part of the Americas. And this is just another demographic slide where it says 2.5 million people are undocumented youth in the US, and from that 125,000 undocumented students reach high school age every year. 98,000 of those undocumented are undocumented students that graduate from high school every year. 31,000 undocumented students enroll in college every year, and about 1,950 undocumented students graduate from college every year. Cool. Now Ale will share her screen.
We will speed through this because, like always, we're late. But that's our fault. Okay, which screen are you seeing? Do you see student rights?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, there we go. I have too many screens. So with student rights, we just want to touch on a couple of them. So first and foremost, we like to remind folks that education is inherently political. We were told that this conference would have folks from over 30 states. Daniela and I are based in Washington, which it's a little different. There's a lot of access for undocumented folks here. But I know in some of your states, there may not be. And just the simple fact that we're in this space together talking about undocumented issues is inherently political. So we just like to share that at the very, very beginning. Then we also have, you can see my student rights slide, right? Okay. Yes. Then we have student rights. So the most important right, one of the most important rights that all our students have, including our undocumented folks, is FERPA. So for those of us who work in public ed, we know that FERPA is what really protects our student records. And that's what doesn't allow us to legally ask folks if they're undocumented or not, but also I think particularly for us, I don't know about you all, but at least here, we're in a like 100% virtual at the moment. So please do not disclose people's statuses in writing. That is super important. Do not put it in email. If somebody's trying to make you do that, you tell them, hell no, and then you give them a call. But that is really, really important. And that's particularly in this college access space where you may be talking with financial aid offices or registrar offices or just somebody in the college. Even less, we actually should be doing that and then just picking up the phone if you're like advocating on behalf of a student. We have Plier versus the, which is what allows folks to get access to K-12 education. However, that's very different for higher ed. So because we don't know where everybody is, we provided this link that shares by state. If your state has in-state tuition and or financial aid for undocumented students, driver's licenses, professional and occupational licenses, and then access to healthcare. So I highly encourage you all to go see what there is. For my folks here in Washington State, we do have in-state tuition and financial aid. We also have driver's licenses, and we have limited access to healthcare, particularly for minors. However, we don't have things like professional or occupational licenses, right? It's on a case-by-case cases. So I think it's also just really important for you all to get familiar with what are some of the laws that actually are within your state, or is there none? Because some states also don't have anything because there's no such thing as a law. However, there are some states that straight up ban students from going to school, which we know those to be Alabama and South Carolina. Then we have some best practices. How about, Daniela, do you want me to just share? Because it's getting, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Let's just go with it. Cool.
Go ahead.
So yeah, some best practices and conversation guides we go here. The quote we used is from a undocumented student's letter of demand for Yuta Bothell when we did a walkout. We can just go on to the next slide. Cool. So first thing, right, is don't lead, right? That's a very, very best practice we recommend to all educators, is to follow the lead of undocumented youth. As undocumented youth want DACA, undocumented youth know how to organize and create change, right? And we know that educators love to read, so there's some articles there that you can look into. So making sure that you show up as an ally, and how do you show up to use your privilege to support undocumented youth movements. Next slide, please. Cool. So in conversations, when you are, in spaces where you're talking to undocumented folks, it's important to check your privilege. So acknowledge that undocumented folks do not have access to healthcare, enhanced IDs, social security benefits, traveling around the world. Also, many don't even have DACA. So I know that there's people that like to be like, oh, you're undocumented, so you have DACA. It's like, no, that's actually not accessible to everybody, right? So that's another piece. Do not ask immigrants any if they go home or country of birth often. Don't ask that question. It's very uncomfortable and very emotionally heavy for us. Once you meet an undocumented student, do not talk about undocumented issues all the damn time, right? It's happened where, Ale and I are very open about our status, and people will just start speaking about undocumented issues all the time when we're in the room. So just don't do that. It's tiring. Next one is talking about Trump and the upcoming elections all the damn time is also very annoying. We don't want to think about these things, and it's just too much. Do not suddenly drop news on them. So for example, when DACA got rescinded, there's all these people that are like, oh my God, like DACA got rescinded, this is so annoying. And that's like, that makes me mad. It's like, well, folks are already processing that for ourselves. We don't need to carry also your anger and for you to just drop those news on people. So definitely do not do that. If a major immigration thing happens, do not ask how are you, or say how messed up everything is. Instead say, I just want you to know I'm thinking about you and sending you love and power. I'm sorry. And then do not write a single out undocumented identifying language, like we said, especially in a virtual world. Do not put it on an email. That's just against the law. And the last one is, if they trust you, they will usually approach you first. Cool, we're gonna go to the next slide. Here's a large, we created this conversation guide, which is way larger sure, I believe the link is on the comments, if I'm correct, so you can get access to it there. Yeah, thank you, Ale. And then the next one is inclusivity around paying for college. So in Washington State, we have access to in-state tuition for undocumented folks. It's called WASFA. So for our educators that are in Washington State, please make sure, and if you're in your state, there's also access to in-state tuition or forms of paying for college for undocumented students. Make sure that you drop it on your syllabus. Make sure you talk about it when you work with students around, if you're working with students around accessibility and helping them access college or higher education. Make sure you're always saying, you know, FAFSA, WASFA, to make sure that they know that you know your shit, right? Sorry, that just bad words come out of nowhere. But make sure that they see that you know that you know about access for them, so they have a, you know, so they feel more comfortable in coming out to you. And so we like to say, come out to them first, right? So this is one way where, you know, you make sure that it's inclusive as possible, and by including all the options for undocumented students and finding scholarships as well. Cool, next slide. So like I just said, come out as an unafraid educator. There's some posters that we have shared in our trainings before saying, you know, I'm an unafraid educator with and for undocumented students. We recommend to have those visual pieces, or if you're in a virtual world, try to have a poster behind you, or like, you know, make it your profile, your picture on your profile, just so folks, students are able to see, oh, you know, I feel supported here, but also be a responsible educator. And if you're going to use that imagery, make sure that you have the resources to actually be able to be of support for undocumented students. Cool. This is you, Ale.
Yeah, I didn't unmute. Yes, and then we do have this a scholarship. This is a scholarship list for Washington State. However, if you just go to scholarshipjunkies.org, there also support students in general to get access to scholarships, including essay revision and everything. We've been working a lot with Scholarship Junkies since March, since the pandemic started, and then we'll share at the very end why. But very, very supportive folks who, basically, if a student goes and tells them, I'm undocumented, they already know what to do. Like, they know how to support immediately, regardless of the state that you all are working in. And again, you have access to all these slides, so you can feel free to copy the link later. I think another big thing that it's a best resource is that a lot of undocumented folks don't know their rights. So you as an educator are legally allowed to share commonly know your rights resources with folks. And then we also have these cards, which would look exactly like this, for folks to share. And they are translated in, I believe, 7 different languages. So included the top languages across the country that most undocumented people speak. So both in English, Spanish, Hindi, I don't even remember the rest, but there's a lot. So this is something that you can do, is be constantly sharing know your rights resources with all your students, because this also applies to folks like the police and folks like I. So it could be honestly for anybody. Then we have, you can also support folks create family safety plans. So this is in case an elder in the household gets deported, like who do the children go to? So if you have a safe space to do those with families, we highly encourage them. And then we provide some resources both in English and in Spanish. And again, of course, these are catered for Washington State, but you can always edit them out and put, you know, what are some of the resources you know in your own state or even in your area, right? Because some places are too big to do that. And we have them in English and Spanish for folks to be able to create those family safety plans. Anywhere from, if somebody does in fact get detained by ICE, like who is in charge of this young person now, right? Which is just the reality of being undocumented and having these very hard conversations within each other. Mm-hmm. And then this is not a best practice, but just a reminder, there may be actually other undocumented folks with us today. And if you're not undocumented, you probably have undocumented colleagues, right? So thinking about what are the ways that you can advocate with them and for their own support. We did have a friend who worked at a high school, and the folks in her area, her office was right by the main office. And there was like a lot of raids happening in our state during that time. So they were like, okay, what if ICE does come to school? What are we gonna do since you're so close to the main office? They had a plan. They created a plan alongside her on how to make sure that she was kept safe when ICE, if in case ICE did come. Thankfully, they didn't go to the school, but it had happened at a different school. So it was in people's minds. So it's very important that if you do have colleagues who are undocumented and they're open about it and they want to have some type of plan with you, you can do that as well. And then we have this affirmations. Being undocumented sucks. Like, it's honestly very bad sometimes. We find a lot of power through it, but I think a lot of the times it just really sucks. And, you know, as elections keep coming closer and closer, regardless of the outcome, it's gonna be a lot. So we have this 10 affirmations that you can read with students. Daniela mentioned in her story of self that at some point we did a healing circle. We read this out loud to each other, which was really, really powerful. And this actually applied to like anybody, primarily for our students of color, right? So we want to ensure that this is front and center and that we're keeping both moments of joy, but also of healing in our spaces, rather than just talking about the sad and depressing things that come with being undocumented. And then just an update on what's going on. So many folks may know what DACA is, announced in 2012 by the Obama administration, which is basically a temporary work permit and deferred action, which means you're not priority for deportation. So what is the update? In June 18, the Supreme Court ruled that the Trump administration cannot end DACA in the ways that they tried to end it a couple years ago. They are not putting new DACA applications, so nobody can put in new DACA applications. Folks can renew. However, this is where it's tricky. It sounds like they're not renewing for 2 years. It sounds like they're renewing only for 1 year. So it really depends on who you get and how long they're renewing you for. And then advanced parole is only available for DACA recipients under exceptional circumstances. Advanced parole is a permit to be able to leave the country and come back. So it's very hard to do it, and a lot of people are not doing it for that info. We have the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, who are some partners that we love and trust, put like a memo out about it if folks want to read more into it. But the biggest thing is kind of like DACA's just kind of here, but it's kind of messed up and it's being a constant threat. So that's where we are with it right now. So we'll see what happens, because that's the undocumented world. Just gotta see what happens. We do want to go ahead. I will let Daniela go through this, but we did have actually a question earlier today too around employment. So and about like life after college. So I think we have some resources here for you all in terms of supporting students getting to college. And we know it's very different by state, but the employment piece is one that always tricks people. So we want to be able to give you these resources and tools so that you can support students in conversation about what about life after college, because it's actually one of the big reasons as to why many undocumented students don't decide to pursue a college degree. One could be just state policies, but also it's like, well, what can I do after, right? So Daniela will walk us through this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this was my very personal experience. I was in my last year at UW Bothell, and I was like this close to just just drop out of college just because of the Trump administration and all of that got into office. And I was like, okay, I really just why am I even going to college? I don't have DACA, right? So I'm like, how am I going to get a job afterwards? And that's just something that it's just so frustrating. So I'm going to share a little bit about my experience around employment. Without DACA, like I mentioned, I work at a nonprofit organization based out of Seattle, and we're just gonna go over it real quick. So for the first slide, it's just highlighting different types of work, right? And this may vary depending on the state that you're in, but here's some kind of like breakdown for full-time employees, independent contractors, and co-owner of LLC. And the different types of paperwork needed for that in terms of personal information that's required, government forms, taxes, and startup costs. So those folks that may not have a DACA permit, they may be able to become independent contractors, because anyone, regardless of immigration status, is able to work as an independent contractor. So that is something that I recommend folks looking into that may not have access to work permits like DACA or any other work permit. And in Washington, what you really just need, I'm not sure about other states really, but it's a W-9 form for taxes, you know, well, like a 1099 and the form 1040. Cool, we can move on to the next one. Okay, same for all states. Thank you, Ale. Independent contractors, so in contracting, so all immigrants, like I said, regardless of immigration statuses, are able to earn a living as an independent contractor or start a business using an I-10 or SSN. So I have an I-10, and that's the way I have been able to get hired. And they may, independent contractors also have to save up their own money to pay taxes. At the end, I save up 30% of every single of my paychecks, and that's something that independent contractors should really know before they start, right? So as you work with students that want to go this route, making sure that you support them in knowing those pieces. Because when I first got hired that way, I didn't know, and my taxes got fucked me over. But that is an important piece around independent contracting. Next slide, please. All right, so talking about the situation, right? So in some cases, if the sponsoring organization knows that you're undocumented, it may be legally bound or bound by policy to turn down your application. On the other hand, if you lie about your status, you know, that can also just become an extremely negative consequence if it comes up as a lie, like if they, you know, if they find out. Lying on an application could even cost the ability of adjusting status. So that is also something to kind of be aware about. But if you're unsure about, which is what I've done, the best thing is to just apply to the position. And once you have amazed them, once, you know, they love you, or they love the person, then, you know, then have a discussion about getting paid through other means, all without having to disclose status. So go into the interview, killing it, and once you're offered once they offer the position, I tell Undocu folks to be like, you can either disclose your status and say that you're not able to, you don't have a work permit, but you can work as independent contractor, and seeing how, you know, the organization wants to play that out. So becoming a contractor, what is really needed, right? There's a couple pieces. Obtaining a business license is very important. Filling out a W-9 form with, you know, if the student has an IT number, just like filling that out for the W-9 form. Sign and copy an agreed contract, you know, with both parties, kind of just lay out in bullet points the description of the position. Both sign and have a copy. If possible, fill out a direct deposit form. If required, background check with a state ID, and then renewing that contract after the amount of time that was agreed upon, and have the new contract signed and copied for both parties. And then it just something I really like to also mention is the negotiating a higher pay due to inaccessibility to benefits, right? So independent contractor, well, like, you know, Undocu folks don't get that benefits. So negotiating a higher pay is definitely key for it to be equitable once getting the job. Yeah. Next slide. So this is an article written by Carla Reyes, who is the owner of KCR, Public Relations. And she says, you know, you're not required to discuss your immigration status with any of your clients. Seek out professional membership organizations in your field that would lead to meeting potential clients and building a reputation. No organization is too small or too big to contract you. Large organizations often have more resources and more expertise in hiring independent contractors. Try your best to open opportunities for other small business owners and immigration students, and seek out to foster mentor relationships with business professionals and business owners. Okay, next slide. And then this is a website I really like to give out to educators to have access to and look into, and to also share with their undocumented students. Immigrant Rising Resources is the Immigrant Rising website. They have a lot of information around entrepreneurship, and they often also have a lot of scholarships to start up businesses, specifically for immigrants, undocumented folks, and it has breaks down everything from ITINs to business structures and how to access all of that as an undocumented person. I believe they're based out of California, but they're national. Cool. Do you want to talk about that last one, Ale?
I am not, but I have some, there's some questions on the chat that I think are really great that I want to actually say out loud. So the question was, can students fill out a FAFSA if they have an ITIN number? The answer is no. It will actually reject their application because you need to have a valid social security number to fill out a FAFSA. However, where it gets complicated is you may have some students who have DACA, which means they have a valid social security number. However, to be eligible for FAFSA, you have to be a US citizen or a permanent, a legal permanent resident. And there's some other immigration statuses, but DACA isn't it. Mm-hmm. So I would really encourage you all to see, one, find out if your state has in-state tuition or not and state financial aid. And then if they do have it, there's probably a different form that they fill out, but it's not FAFSA. Some students who have DACA may fill out a FAFSA to get like their EFC, right? To see, okay, what is my EFC to get access to other scholarships? But the FAFSA app will be rejected because their documentation is not citizenship or green card or like a valid immigration status. So I hope that answers the questions on the chat. I think they're really great questions because I know we didn't dive into that. But essentially, basically, if you're undocumented, even if you have a work permit, FAFSA will say hell no to you. They will only say yes to folks with specific immigration statuses, which you can find on the FAFSA website, which those are. It gets really, really complicated, but the rule of thumb is basically undocumented equals no FAFSA. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're not gonna go through this section because we don't have time, but essentially just like speeding through it. Students and family members unfortunately do get detained or deported, and educators can have a role in this in terms of being advocates. So I encourage you to look through these slides on your own to see, you know, what role could you play in case there is in fact a raid in your area. At least here in our state, there are some folks who have specifically come together to like go respond to raids. So see if there's something similar in your state. If you live in Washington, we're happy to give you that information so that if there is a raid in your community, you can go, if you're an ally, you can go and stop it. If you're not an ally, then stay away. You know, and by that, I mean, if you're undocumented, stay away. Like you don't need to be there. So just very important for you all to see that. And I think just to finish up in our last 5 minutes, we're gonna go ahead and just tell you all some of the basic things that we believe undocumented folks should have access to. So educators, this is like our top 5 things that we believe you could do to create more welcoming spaces for undocumented folks. One is to conduct professional development trainings that are focused on undocumented people at your schools and in your districts. We do encourage those to be actually led by undocumented folks and to compensate undocumented folks to do that. We know in our education world, we have too many consultants who happen to be white. So how do we get away from that and actually start compensating the people with the lived experiences, right? Hosting Know Your Rights sessions. We mentioned that a lot of folks don't have access to this information. So we encourage you all to partner with an organization or something like that to host a Know Your Rights session for folks. And there's a lot of PowerPoints that there actually are out there that you could use. Hosting legal clinics with attorneys. A lot of undocumented folks have never had access to a lawyer, and specifically an immigration lawyer. So hosting a small consultations where like a lawyer can come pro bono and actually have, you know, 10 to 15 minute consultations with your undocumented students and families would be a massive benefit. Every time we've done that, we've actually seen that some folks may be eligible to get access to a pathway to citizenship that they never knew of before. So those are also really, really cool. Then actually that's supporting folks to do those family safety plans, right? Because in case there is a detention or deportation in the family, that folks have access to that. And then also that there's a copy given to the school in case this raid happens while the student is at the school. Oh, there's a question. Would it be beneficial to those students if I wear a butterfly pin? I actually don't know. I don't know how broadly the butterfly is known, particularly amongst younger students. So I actually think those big posters are better that say like, you know, I'm an unafraid educator with them for undocumented folks. So we can definitely, I think that would be best. And then are all these resources on your, yeah, all of these resources will be in this PowerPoint that we're sharing with y'all. And we'll put the link again at the end. And then providing mental health support. Undocumented folks don't have actually access to healthcare. So like getting access to mental health supports can be really, really difficult. So I wanna share with you a very brief story about a school that did this. A school came together, all super grassroots, no district funding. They came together, asked for a bunch of volunteers to come and had stations. This was like on a Saturday. I know we can't do these things, a lot of these things physically anymore, but thinking about it, you know, how do we use breakout groups for things like this? And had folks actually go through stations where in one, there was a Know Your Rights session. The next station was talking to a lawyer. The next one was to do the safety plan. And the last one was to get mental health support. That's a really good way to also bring folks together and have this in like one space hits all and doing it once or twice a year. It doesn't have to be every weekend. That's exhausting, right? But like, what is something that you all could provide in your schools around this? And then very last but not least, of course, we have, I did want to share this with y'all. And then for those who are not in Washington, please find out if there's something similar in your states. So we have 3 funds in the state of Washington that are supporting undocumented folks during this terrible pandemic that we're in. One was led by us in the Washington Dream Coalition. We raised $6 million to support undocumented folks to get access to a one-time like payment of up to $1,000 for COVID-19. The city of Seattle put this out together last week. Also funds for immigrants in Seattle. Their target is undocumented folks. So if you have students or families that live in Seattle, we highly encourage you to share this with them. And then tomorrow here in our state, a fund will open. If you go to that website, it's broken because it's not live yet. But there will be $40 million for undocumented folks in our state. So I know Oregon has something similar. I know California has something similar. I only know that of the West Coast. I don't know about other places. So highly encourage you to see what are the funding options that there are out there for undocumented folks in your communities, and how do you share that with students and families. This pandemic is hitting undocumented folks in ways we never even thought were imaginable, because undocumented folks don't have access to unemployment insurance, and we're explicitly left out of the stimulus packages. So very, very important that if we're talking about education and how to support our students and their families, we have to think, of course, about the education components, but we also have to think about just their livelihoods, right? A lot of folks are working in those essential jobs that are getting exposed to COVID-19 every single day. What protections are there out there for undocumented people? And, you know, I'm no expert at that, but we know at least here in our state, we have some funds available for them. So that was a lot. This is kicking us out in 50 seconds, but thank you all so much. We're gonna put this link once again in the chat. Thank you for bearing with us. This was the first time